Now, let's bring in the former ADF Major General Mick Ryan. Mick, it's good to see you this morning. So, as you just heard, and as you know, there are these discrepancies over timings and what, if any, advance notice was given by Beijing. How are you reading into it all this morning?
Yeah, g'day, Peter. It's good to be with you. I think there's a few things we can read into it, but first and foremost, what we've seen is a failure of communication between the Chief of the Australian Defence Force and the Prime Minister of Australia. We should be deeply concerned by this, where the two of them have very different views of what happened around what is actually a very simple event.
Has the Prime Minister misled the public?
Well, I'm not sure whether he's misled the public, but he obviously didn't have all the information that he should have had, and that information should have come from the CDF or the Minister of Defence. I mean, part of the problem is we have a Minister of Defence who's only part-time in the job. He's DPM and Minister of Defence, and that might be contributing as well.
What does this expose in your view, Mick? I mean, OK, so there's a difference of 40 minutes between when we were alerted about these live fire drills. In the grand scheme of things, we knew the ships were there. Does it matter?
It really matters. A lot can happen in 40 minutes, particularly if the Chinese intend at some future point in time to do something more dastardly. We're going to see more of this. The Chinese want to keep the Australian Navy close to Australia. They don't want them anywhere near China, so we'll see more of this. I think this is exposing some of the opportunity costs of the enormous expense we're seeing on 3 nuclear submarines that we'll get in a decade or so. It's increasingly impacting on the readiness of the Navy and the other services. So I think we really need to have a fundamental look at how much we're spending on defence.
So, in other words, we've got to up it like the Brits are doing this week.
Yeah, well, we're only sitting around 1.9 to 2%. That's pretty pathetic, actually, given what the government said in its national defence strategy about the worst strategic circumstances since World War II. We need to be at least at 2.5, probably at 3%, so we have a more sovereign ADF and defence industry.
I remember the late Jim Molan told me we needed to get to 4%. That was a while back now. But anyway, Jackie Lambie, she said here on this program yesterday, Mick, that this proves that we are stuffed if China wants to cause trouble in our region. Do you think this proves that?
Well, we're certainly in trouble. I think we're still living in the 1990s in many respects. This is a very different world. And the events of Europe a couple of weeks ago indicate that the storm front that passed over Europe will hit us. We can't just keep our heads down and hunker down like the government appears to want to do.
So is China having a good giggle at this, do you think?
Oh, they're the winners out of this whole thing. They've shown up some deficiencies in Australian command and control between civil and military systems. They've shown that they can keep the ADF busy within a couple of 100 kilometres of Australia's mainland. But also they're testing what the American reaction is. And at the moment, I'm not quite sure what that is.
Do you reckon there are subs out there too? Is it a foregone conclusion, do you think? I mean, James Patterson seemed to think so.
Well, it's certainly possible. And if the ADF was able to detect them and track them, they're not going to talk about it. But it's certainly possible, as was highlighted in Senate estimates yesterday.
So when you say, I mean, the China's trying to force us back, and, you know, there's the story of the flares in recent times as well. Are they trying to push us out of the region, push us out of the Pacific as well? What are the intentions there?
Yeah, China's grand strategy is that it owns this part of the world. It may not want us all speaking Chinese, but it wants to be able to influence Australian government policy and split us away from our relationship with the Americans. That is their grand plan here, and we need to do everything we possibly can to make sure that doesn't happen.
All right, Mick, it's good to have you with us this morning again. We'll chat again soon.